Edward Kuester was born in Baltimore, Maryland, to Charles and Ida Kuester on November 9, 1914. Charles was a German immigrant, and he worked for a local steel plant as a stock clerk. Edward was raised in Baltimore and showed talent as a singer from an early age. He graduated from City College, and by 1940, Edward was working as a clerk for the Sherwood Brothers oil distribution firm. It was around this time that Edward married a pretty young woman by the name of Dorothy May Steinfeld, and 1 year later, America entered the Second World War. On May 31, 1943, Edward was drafted into the Army and became a part of the Army Transportation Corps' Water Division. This comprised all of the Army's waterborne forces, and Staff Sergeant Kuester was soon assigned to the Liberty ship SS James Whitcomb Riley. The Riley was built by the Oregon Shipbuilding Corporation in 1942, the 193rd of her class to be completed, and she plied the submarine-infested Atlantic Ocean from America to England, delivering vital supplies for the war effort. It was while the Riley was docked in Boston, Massachusetts, that Staff Sergeant Kuester found the Temple Club, which hosted nightly dances featuring Jack Casey and his orchestra. The club was operated by Mrs. Isabella Cobrick and her family, with whom Edward became good friends, and when the SS James Whitcomb Riley left port, Staff Sergeant Kuester kept in touch with the occasional letter. Saturday, June 23, 1945. Dear folks, as you can see by the above, this is Saturday night, but quite different from what I would like it to be, I assure you. It has always been such a great pleasure for me to come to the Temple Club on Saturday nights, that not one passes by that I don't think of you and the gang. The fine friendships I have made at the club have been a tremendous factor in moral upkeep while away from home, and I am sure there must be a special reward in heaven for all of you, in return for your sacrifices and riding efforts. I wonder tonight, while in the middle of this great Atlantic, what the gang is doing now, and particularly how the weather is, since there is a tempest out here right now, and the waves are lashing about in all their fury. As you can well imagine, life aboard ship can be pretty dull, and offers a marked contrast to an evening of fun at the club, dancing to the music of Jack Casey and his boys. There's really a special spot in my heart for them. The delivery of this bit of mail may take some time, since we still have hundreds of miles to go before we touch the shores of Europe. But I will see that it gets in the first mail. Remember me to Betty and all the lovely lassies, and until we meet again, God bless you. Sincerely, Eddie. 17th December, 1945. Dear Mrs. Colebrook, I am writing this because I feel that it must surely have been you and Betty that it was my misfortune to miss today at the Army Base Pier. It was just one of those tricks of fate that are played upon poor mortals like us. It was only a matter of minutes that we missed one another. It would have been like taking a vitamin pill to have seen you and Betty, and I was very much chagrined to learn that you had been down to the ship. Thanks a million for the fine handkerchief, and bless you for your thoughtfulness. I had great hopes of seeing you and the gang when I found out that Boston was to be our destination, but my hopes certainly went up in smoke when the facts were made known that we were to stay only a few hours. My poor luck reigned throughout my visit, because my chum Smitty was working at Camp Miles Standish in Taunton, Massachusetts. Today of all days. That was a sharp disappointment too, I can assure you. For now it looks like it will be quite some time before I see either Smitty or you all again. I say this because the Boston Post is closing, and its personnel and ships are to be transferred to New York. With this in mind, you can understand my deep disappointment today at the way Lady Luck treated me. Whatever happens, and if our paths do not cross in the future, I want you to know that I will always treasure our friendship and my memories of Temple Place. A number of friends have asked me to send them a copy of my adventures in Pompeii, Italy, and I can't for the life of me remember whether or not I took it upon myself to send you a copy too. I feel that I didn't, so I am taking the initiative by sending you a copy with the hope that you might find it interesting. It was really a letter to my wife in the form of an adventure story. If perchance I did send you a copy, pass it on to Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell, with my compliments and best wishes. All my love to the gang and Jack Casey and his orchestra. Best wishes for the merriest of Christmases and the happiest of New Years. Sincerely, Eddie. 11th September, 1945. Naples and Pompeii, Italy. Dear Dottie, mark ye well this date, because it has been a great day in my life. Have you ever wondered how it would feel to walk through a town or city that was over 2,000 years old? A city that existed before the time of Christ? Well, I have many times, and today, due to fate's kindness, it was my extreme pleasure to experience that previously unknown sensation. I'll begin at the beginning, and see what I can do to make this story as close to an actual visit as possible. The adventure began when I left the ship and boarded a GI truck, with Lieutenants Tuttle and Talgo, and two of the ship's officers. We started out about 9:30 a.m. from the docks, and the truck wound its way through the city of Naples, toward the edge of town, and the open country road which proceeded along the coast of the Bay of Naples. We had an Italian soldier for a chauffeur, and he really knew his business. Italy is well known for its narrow streets, and on this trip I had a chance to see many of them, with their carts drawn by tiny mules, and loaded wonderfully well with their goods for marketing, such as vegetables, scrap iron, fruits, etc. All of the streets are crowded, but the chauffeur we had worked miracles with the horn on the truck, and although my heart was in my mouth a few times at his reluctance to slacken speed, we were soon on the outskirts of the city, without a single mishap. As the truck clipped off the miles on the road, I had a fine opportunity to get a better look at Mount Vesuvius, because we were miles closer, and I could even see the mountainside, and the outside of the volcano upon which was visible the black, brown, and gray colored ash and lava. The mountain was still miles away, however, despite its deceiving illusion of nearness. All of the country around the area was green with trees and foliage, and the hillside was dotted with homes. On one particular promontory there stood what appeared to be a large estate, doubtlessly owned by some wealthy family. It was very imposing and stood completely by itself, the nearest neighbor being several miles away, if I may judge of distance. The truck, meanwhile, was really eating up the miles, and although it took us about an hour to get to Pompeii, I scarcely noticed the passage of time, for my eyes were everywhere, drinking in the scenery about us. Upon reaching the new city of Pompeii, upon inquiry, we were directed to the shrine of Pompeii, a cathedral fashioned along the lines of St. Peter's in Rome, and dedicated to the Blessed Virgin of the Rosary. It is a $26 million structure, and contains an organ which cost $2 million. Does that take your breath away? Well, it certainly did take mine. At the church, a guide appeared as if by magic, speaking quite good English to boot. He took us through the orphanage which adjoins the church, and is supported by same, and also through the church itself. All through the corridors of this part of the church were glass cases on the walls, in which imposed gifts in silver had been offered by people who had received miraculous favors and blessings through intercession by the Blessed Virgin. There were gifts of all description, such as hearts, hands, flowers, medals, and vases of solid silver. I might cite an example to clarify in your mind the origin of these gifts. For instance, if a person suffering from heart disease received a miraculous cure through prayer, he felt it fitting to fashion a heart of solid silver in acknowledgement of the blessings received. On another occasion, a soldier, being wounded badly in the hand and in danger of losing it, was miraculously cured through prayer to the Blessed Virgin. Therefore, the presentation of a hand in solid silver was donated to profess his appreciation. On still another occasion, an Italian girl was on her way to New York to be married, when a serious illness befell her, and only through a miracle was she saved. After she was married, she sent her wedding gown, a most gorgeous creation of silk and fine old lace, to the church, where it now reposes in a glass case. There are many other cases of such miracles and blessings being received, and each person in turn, for having received such blessings, sent these gifts in silver to the church. Next, we were shown the treasure room, in which reposes the vestments of the former popes of the Catholic Church, together with many chalices, monstrances, swords, crosses, cups, epaulettes, and other articles of silver and gold, a number of which were studded with precious rubies. From this room we went to one of the schoolrooms, in which were being taught the orphans of kindergarten age. As we approached the room and stood outside of the closed door, the little tots were engaged in prayer, led by a sister. Well, if ever I saw angels from heaven, they certainly looked the part. It was a class of about 30, and they were all dressed alike in simple dresses of white and blue, and around the neck of each hung a rosary. For the most part, they were brunettes, there being only a few blondes. While they were still praying, the guide opened the door and motioned that we might go in. Soon after our entrance, they finished their prayer, and some of them began coming over to us, taking our hands and hugging us as though we were blood relatives. I sat one of them on my lap, and the first thing she noticed was my sunglasses, which I had suspended from a buttonhole in my shirt. Naturally, I let her try them on, and her face lighted up like an electric bulb as she looked through them and saw how different things appeared. When some of the other children heard her exclamations and spotted the glasses, they wanted to try them on too. I thought I was going to have a battle on my hands right there, but I removed them and let another little tot try them on, fitting them myself so they wouldn't drop to the floor. Just about this time, the sister noticed the camera I had with me, and bringing an album over to me, showed the pictures therein of the children. Trying to ask in the best way she knew how, she spoke only Italian, if I would like to take a picture of the children. I soon grasped her meaning, and nodded my head yes, while she proceeded to open all the shutters which had been closed to keep out the hot sun. The room was pretty well lighted, but I'm a little pessimistic as to the outcome of the picture, which included the sister, her children, and the fellows that were with me. After we had taken the picture, I thanked the sister in the best way I could with a polite bow, and all of us proceeded to leave the room. However, the little tot who at first laid claim to my sunglasses seemed reluctant to part with them, and when I finally retrieved them, her little face was a picture of disappointment, and I thought she was going to have a good cry right on the spot. She returned to her seat, and as we departed, I looked over my shoulder at her, and that sweet little face was lined with sadness. The sister gave each of us a holy picture of the Blessed Virgin, and I carefully tucked mine in my shirt pocket. The next stop was the dormitories of the children. An air of meticulous care permeated the entire place. The dormitories, with their small beds and waxed floors, were spotless, and as the remark goes, you could have eaten off the floor. Wherever you find Catholic sisters, you will also find cleanliness to the nth degree. I know because I speak from experience. Finally, we entered the church itself. In my day, I have seen beautiful churches, some surpassing others in many respects, others in few, but I believe this church rates at the head of the list. To be frank, I was astonished at the beauty which surrounded me on all sides. There is a mass going on at the time, and it almost seems sacrilegious to walk around, but I did so anyway, trying to keep as quiet as possible. There was marble of all designs and colors from Africa, England, and Italy. The frescoes, paintings, mosaics, and statuary simply took my breath away, and at the uppermost part of the main altar, there reposed a picture of the Blessed Virgin, literally covered with diamonds and rubies. The marble columns, of Doric and Corinthian style, were of highly polished marble, and the altar railing was a masterpiece of graceful lines. The time spent in the church was far too little to suit me, and I didn't notice how many small altars there were. The organ was all done in gold, and I would have given much to have been able to hear its dulcet tones fill the church with lovely music. However, that pleasure was not being enjoyed at the time, and we took our departure. Upon leaving the church, our guide turned us over to still another guide, who was to conduct us on a tour of the ancient ruins of the city of Pompeii. The entrance to the ancient city is near the church, so it was but a matter of minutes before we were passing the spot, which still bore the remnants of the city wall. There is but a small bit of the wall to be seen, the rest is yet being uncovered. At this time there is still much of the city that has yet to be excavated, but the greater part of it can be seen. As you walk into the city, the first thing to be seen is the amphitheater, built soon after the colonization of Pompeii in BC 80. The amphitheater had many paintings on the wall around the arena. These depicted gladiator contests and wrestling matches. When bloody contests were announced, huge crowds filled the seats of the place, which could hold approximately 20,000 persons who would come from Pompeii and all the surrounding towns. From my point of view, it did not differ greatly from our stadium of today, bearing the paintings on the walls and the stone seats. Anyone with a vivid imagination could almost close his eyes and see the wild animals dashing forth into the arena to meet the dauntless gladiators. On your left, to the west of the amphitheater, stood a building, or should I say open-air arena, which occupied a square block area. This was termed the Great Palaestra of the Pompeian young men, containing in the middle a very large swimming pond or pool. Here were held sports and games also. Within the same place was also furnished all the necessary religious, sanitary, and hygienical services which might be required by sportsmen engaging in exercises or events. It was surrounded on three sides by spacious and airy porticos, and these also served as shelter to the occupants of the amphitheater in case of a hailstorm during the performance in its arena. A great many inscriptions of every argument and kind were found scratched upon the columns of the palaestra by people or young men, here lodged or staying, especially by sportsmen. Here could be seen, for instance, accounts of foods bought in Pompeii, or inscriptions of verses of Virgil, whose poems had become so popular soon after the death of the poet. Comments and witty mottos of every kind about worth and force of the most famous sport champions of the palaestra. From here we proceeded into the streets of the city. The first street of importance that we struck was the Street of Abundance, where I took my second picture of the day, looking up the street toward the center of the city. Along this street on the houses still remain the numbers of the houses which were classified in certain regions. For example, Reggio 11. The house numbers were inscribed in small blocks of white marble. Our region comprised of 10 houses, in contrast to our block, which numbers many more. The streets were of large boulders or great stones, laid of course like our cobblestone streets. In the streets were large stepping stones, due to the fact that there were no sewage systems. And when the heavy rains came and the streets were filled with water, these stepping stones were used in the same manner as we would to cross a small stream, without getting our feet wet. In the center of the streets were worn large and deep grooves in the stone, as a result of use by the chariots for years and years. Lizards were to be seen at every turn. There were drinking fountains along the street of marble and lava stone, and on the tops of these blocks of stone were also deep grooves worn as a result of the people placing their hands there as they bent over to drink from the fountain. These grooves were on both sides of the fountain, indicating the usage of their hands. A great deal of the finish on the buildings was done in smooth stucco, upon which were paintings, inscriptions, names of proprietors, etc. There were also many examples of bas relief work, done in great detail, showing the fine craftsmanship of these people of another age. Included on the tour were the bakeries, where they ground the grain and did the baking, rich homes with fine paintings done on the walls of stucco, gardens, palaces, buildings of the bath, where they not only had Turkish baths, but hot and cold showers, and pools to bathe in. In such buildings were niches in the wall, approximately 18 by 24, in which were placed the clothes while showering or bathing. In some of the homes, there could be seen on the walls pictures scratched by the children, proving that the children of today are not unlike the youngsters who lived thousands of years ago. Some of the pictures were done pretty well, too, although it must have been more difficult to scratch them, rather than just draw them in pencil. In the cellars of several places were galleries containing the bodies and plaster cast of some of the Pompeians whose bones were discovered. The state of preservation was remarkable, and on several of them could clearly be seen the skull and teeth of the people. I might add also that the people comprised 2 families, each in their own respective home, who were probably suffocated from the gases given off by the burning lava. They had no doubt gone to the cellar, feeling safe behind the thick walls, which was their chief means of ventilation, windows being practically taboo at the time. You could even see the expression of pain on the faces of the people, indicating the suffering they must have endured before death came. Some other places of interest that we saw were the Temple of Apollo, the Arch of Nero, I had my picture taken there, Street of Fortune, La Basilica or Cathedral, the Forum, and the Temple of Isis. En route, I purchased 2 watercolor paintings of the Temple of Apollo. Terracotta was also used to a great extent for supporting pillars, kitchenwares, and large jars. The wine jars were rather unusual, the bottom being brought to a point, this point being placed in the earth to keep the wine cool. There are many things that probably escape me at this time, but I have procured sufficient data on the place that I might use to refresh my mind on the subject. At the close of the tour, the necessary remunerations were made to the guide, the expense of which I was not permitted to share. The officers took care of everything. Since we had missed lunch, and the hour was now about 13:30, everyone was quite hungry, and the guide led us to a garden restaurant, where we indulged in spaghetti and red wine. The spaghetti was fair, and I thought the wine was very good. To add to the Neapolitan atmosphere, we were also entertained by troubadours, 3 in number, playing 2 violins and a guitar, with a tenor singing for the vocal. They played Back to Sorrento, Amore, and I nearly fell through my chair when they swung into none other than the Chattanooga Choo-Choo. That's one of Ed Cabernagle's favorite swing numbers, and I thought of him as soon as I heard the opening strains. The tenor had a nice light lyric voice, and he sang Back to Sorrento and several other Italian numbers that I did not recognize. I shall always remember that particular incident as a most pleasant occasion. At the close of the meal, we did some more walking about the new city of Pompeii, and I dropped into the offices of the church to purchase a booklet on its history and a few postcards. I also bought several small picture booklets. Time soon caught up with us, and about 1600 hours we left Pompeii and enjoyed an uneventful trip back to the ship. Although we had done a great deal of walking on the tour, I cannot say that I was tired upon my return. It was another great day in my life, and an invaluable experience to add to my collection. On March 22, 1946, Staff Sergeant Kuester was discharged from the Army and returned to his wife Dorothy in Baltimore. Edward went to work for the Baltimore Distribution Center of the BP Oil Corporation as a retail salesman, a position he held for 31 years. He moved to this townhouse on Haverhill Road in Violettville around 1950, and it was here that they raised their daughter Dorothea. Edward was a devout Catholic and a talented singer, and he performed for many years as a tenor soloist with the 14 Holy Martyrs Catholic Church. Edward Kuester passed away in his home on May 15, 1973, after a long illness, and was laid to rest at Loudon Park Cemetery in Baltimore, Maryland. He was only 58 years old.